Okay, so now we're going to get to the final step of our session number 3. And another way of going through and writing a storyline. There are multiple ways of going through and coming up with a storyline. When we go through a meet on Zoom for me to go through and do a Q&A session for you about this class, I will go through and give you some documents to read that give you examples of how it all comes together. But another method is called using steep trends. So to divide the world into social, technology, environment, economic and political issues. And you take each of those and you imagine how the world will change based on that variable. Okay, so this is called the steep approach. And the example you've got on this particular slide is for a scenario that's been used by one of the consultancies called survival of the fittest. And you can see how they go through and write about the world in just a few sentences from the perspective of technology, of politics, of environment, of resources, and of the economy. And this is something that I would like you to go through and consider doing for your own companies in this exercise, is to go through and do the steep approach, right? So you'll be doing that in a few moments' time. But just to go through and give you some hints about how you go through and put in together a full storyline. These are some of the techniques and tactics that the experts use. Make sure that when you write the storyline, it is relevant to your company, that it highlights some challenges ahead for the organization, but also it's plausible. It's, you know, you're talking about unlikely events, but make sure that they have some degree of plausibility. Stories need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. If you take your mind back to the exercise we had face-to-face in session number 1, we went through and did a storyline development exercise, right, where you worked together in a team and you had to go through and come up with a storyline based on a few words each. So those stories have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, okay? Try and make sure you use some characters in a storyline. So there might be a villain, a bad person in that story. Could be a hero, right? But you want to go through and build tensions as these characters and these storylines develop. You want to have dramas, conflicts, events, okay? And then you want to use the right type of the verb. You don't use words like this might happen or this could happen, right? You say this did happen, this is happening when you write that particular storyline, okay? So these are some of the hints that the experts give in developing storylines. Okay? And it strikes me as I'm saying this to you that, session number 2, I highlighted Pierre Bach, and he says that when you do storyline, when you do scenarios for the first time, it really is difficult to do because this is abstract and it feels a little bit difficult to get your head around because you worry about the relevance of doing this, and it might appear to be in some ways too abstract. But the more you do this, the better it develops your creativity, the better it is for you to go through and pick up on things which are ahead of your competitors, right? Those early signs of something shifting in your industry and the world in which that company operates, right? So this is why scenario planning requires you to go through and do this process, okay? The better you are at it, the easier it becomes and the more applied you can see it being, right? So storyline development. In my experience of 7 years of teaching this subject area, this is where lots of people struggle with, okay, really committing to this stage. But again, it's about creativity. And Huawei is one of the leaders in the market at the moment in doing scenario planning. When I was in Hong Kong, I worked with the head of scenario planning for Huawei, and he went through and said there are 4 different ways you go through and create stories from their perspective. Right? So number 1 is you incorporate different stakeholders within the storyline. So the people who are already currently important to Huawei, you include them when you're writing your story. Number 2 is you go through and be creative. You create things like newspaper story headlines to go through and get your head around the way that things might develop in the future. Then you want to use well-known people and characters to build up that story. And finally, you need to go through and incorporate your standard story plot lines, winners and losers, David and Goliath, so those who have got little power, who are challenging those with a lot of power. And you want to have good and bad news stories, right? So I want to highlight here how this is being used frequently by big companies that need to go through and stay ahead of their competitors. This is why they invest hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars in these type of departments to go through and try and get ahead, stay ahead. Okay, so 4 elements to good stories. Just another slide for you to think about. Try and keep it simple. Try and incorporate the past as well as the present and the future. Again, relate to characters. And you have to make sure, you have to finish the story. Okay, storyline development, beginning, middle, and an end. Lots of times when these exercises are completed by students, there's no end to the story. So you need to finish the story as well. Okay, so your final exercise for this class is to go through and start writing a full storyline for each of the 4 quadrants. So you're looking for around about 1 page of writing for each quadrant. And possibly you need to go through and divide yourself up into 3 or 4 subgroups in your team now to go through and do that. And I would like you to go through and email me those before the time we meet for session number 4, so I can read out some of those storylines when we meet face to face.